Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. It's the Monday, May 25th, 2026 episode of the Marco Duray Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Happy Memorial Day to each and every one of you. I hope by now you've reflected upon the true meaning of today, which is honoring, remembering, and taking the time to acknowledge and be grateful to those that have come before us, that have served this nation in uniform, and are now since deceased and have gone on to be with the Lord. President Trump is speaking at Arlington National Cemetery today, I know, and I will try to cut over to that at some point during this monologue if he's speaking so we can all hear it live. But I want to bring everyone's attention over to another great president, President Ronald Reagan, and he once made a quote about freedom, and that hones into really the purpose of Memorial Day, I do believe. And what he said was, "We are forever indebted to those that have given their lives that we might be free." And I reflected upon this a little bit yesterday as I was thinking about today's show. And while we can do this with every generation in American history, what comes to mind is our nation's first generation, the American Revolution generation. Now, it also may have been because I was watching The Patriot yesterday with Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger. I don't know. First of all, I think it's a great movie, by the way. It's brilliant. It's very well done. Very good movie. I think I will encourage all of you to go in and watch it if you have not already. But I was watching it and I was really taken aback. I was thinking to myself, this is a small group of men, 3% of the colonists, and they had enough of King George, the tyranny that resulted from the throne thousands of miles away, and they foresaw a vision that they could do better governing themselves, while declaring that they were free men, to that very powerful and oppressive government. That is a major, major stand to take, especially in that era. Up against a lot, no doubt about it. And this brings us to the importance of our signing of the Declaration of Independence, which was the ultimate defiance to Great Britain, and of course the Crown and what have you. And that made many of the 56 signers become targets now of harassment, torture, bankruptcy, and even death by the British Army. 5 of the signers were captured by the British as being traitors, and subsequently tortured to death. Another 12 had their homes robbed, burned to ashes, and of course lost everything along with it, along with any property that may have been stolen previously by the British Army. But think about this. These men were willing to choose this upon themselves, take it up to themselves, and go up against one of the greatest military powers the world had ever seen up until that point. Think of agrarian farmers putting everything aside for the chance to be free against a powerful, tyrannical state. I mean, the odds would be completely against it. It goes way beyond just a 1-cent tax on tea, which gives us no taxation without representation today. But there was no guarantee that they would win or be granted to rule themselves freely on this land that they lived on. Everything was completely against them, yet somehow they persevered, and they proved to be victorious. But sometimes in history, the underdogs win. And it turned out to be one of the greatest military achievements that these men won. And as a result, despite how much things have changed inside of our country today, regarding our Constitution, if you will, we still live in the freest nation on earth. And that was because of what this group of men gave each and every one of us today. And what was given to us, what we inherited, being our founding and our Constitution from our first generation of this country, I don't believe we'd ever see anything like this ever again in history. I really don't believe that, especially the way things are today. Now, we're so many generations away from the founding, I really believe that it gets overlooked today in many cases. and it's probably difficult to relate to, but its significance was massive in the annals of history, certainly in American history, because without it, we wouldn't be here today. And I truly do believe all that. And while we can reflect on what these men did, most of whose names we do not know, who fought to give their generation and their parents' generation and their children's generation and grandchildren's generation freedom, liberty, unalienable rights based on Christian values, not King George III values. In the only constitutional representative republic ever to limit the powers of government and grant us rights that the government cannot take away from you and I today. All of the UN charters, 193 nations, all have some form of a constitution in some way or another. Imagine that. It's almost every government on the planet. But ours is the only one that grants us a Bill of Rights and prevents the government from changing them. Certainly without amendments to that, which is extremely difficult to do. But you won't find that anywhere else in the world. And that's what makes our founding so unique. And I will say this to you, our Constitution today, despite obviously the way things are today, it's what separates us from complete tyranny. And as a constitutional conservative patriot, we must always be using our due diligence and use our voices as American citizens to protect it at all costs. Because that was granted to us by previous generations. And of course, the generations to come, which have also done what they can to protect it as well. We've always got to protect things. Certainly our rights. And that goes for any branch of government, any level of government that is trying to take them from us. Again, we know that men are corrupt, men do things that are not right. But it's very, very crucial that we never forget what was given to us. And that's why on this day I was thinking exactly about the founding, because really this is where it all began, folks. And there's no way to get around that. I want to play for you, though, President Reagan giving a speech on Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery on May 31st, 1982, and this will ring so true to you listening, because a lot of what President Reagan is describing is very relevant to geopolitics today, and I think you'll all enjoy it very much as the great communicator that he was. Let's listen to his speech on Memorial Day right here on Clip 1.
Mr. President, General, the distinguished guest here with us today, my fellow citizens. In America's cities and towns today, flags will be placed on graves in cemeteries. Public officials will speak of the sacrifice and the valor of those whose memory we honor. In 1863, when he dedicated a small cemetery in Pennsylvania marking a terrible collision between the armies of North and South, Abraham Lincoln noted the swift obscurity of such speeches. But we know now that Lincoln was wrong about that particular occasion. His remarks commemorating those who gave their last full measure of devotion were long remembered. But since that moment at Gettysburg, few other such addresses have become part of our national heritage. Not because of the inadequacy of the speakers, but because of the inadequacy of words. I have no illusions about what little I can add now to the silent testimony of those who gave their lives willingly for their country. Words are even more feeble on this Memorial Day, for the sight before us is that of a strong and good nation that stands in silence and remembers those who were loved and who in return loved their countrymen enough to die for them. Yet we must try to honor them, not for their sakes alone, but for our own. And if words cannot repay the debt we owe these men, surely with our actions, we must strive to keep faith with them and with a vision that led them to battle and a final sacrifice. Our first obligation to them and ourselves is plain enough. The United States and the freedom for which it stands, the freedom for which they died, must endure and prosper. Their lives remind us.
I just want to pause for a moment here. He's absolutely right about this. Because freedom is never free. This is something we always must fight for and to keep it alive. And that there are checks inside of our government to ensure those freedoms, those rights that were granted to us by this founding generation. And it all ties together. And this is why knowing and understanding history is so very much important, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you don't know the sacrifice that was made, the suffering that took place to give us those rights, you take it for granted. We take certain luxuries for granted today in the United States. We live better probably than any other nation on earth. But that doesn't mean it's always guaranteed to us. We have to understand this. Nothing is ever fully guaranteed. And that's why what was granted to us is extremely important still to this day.
Their lives remind us that freedom is not bought cheaply. It has a cost. It imposes a burden. And just as they whom we commemorate were willing to sacrifice, so too must we, in a less final, less heroic way, be willing to give of ourselves. It is this, beyond the controversy and the congressional debate, beyond the blizzard of budget numbers and the complexity of modern weapons systems, that motivates us in our search for security and peace. War will not come again. Other young men will not have to die if we will speak honestly of the dangers that confront us and remain strong enough to meet those dangers. It's not just strength or courage that we need, but understanding and a measure of wisdom as well. We must understand enough about our world to see the value of our alliances. We must be wise enough about ourselves to listen to our allies, to work with them, to build and strengthen the bonds between us. Our understanding must also extend to potential adversaries. We must strive to speak of them not belligerently, but firmly and frankly. And that's why we must never fail to note, as frequently as necessary, the wide gulf between our codes of morality. And that's why we must never hesitate to acknowledge the irrefutable difference between our view of man as master of the state and their view of man as servant of the state. Nor must we ever underestimate the seriousness of their aspirations to global expansion. The risk is the very freedom that has been so dearly won. It is this honesty of mind that can open paths to peace, that can lead to fruitful negotiation, that can build a foundation upon which treaties between our nations can stand and last, treaties that can someday bring about a reduction in the terrible arms of destruction, arms that threaten us with war even more terrible than those that have taken the lives of the Americans we honor today. In the quest for peace, the United States has proposed to the Soviet Union that we reduce the threat of nuclear weapons by negotiating a stable balance at far lower levels of strategic forces.
So this is very, very crucial, especially to where we are today, ladies and gentlemen, because we hear about nuclear weapons with Iran, for example, all the time. And what President Reagan is saying here is very crucial. He's talking about the idea that we can create diplomacy through words versus ending conflict on wars and battlefields where men suffer and die. And we must do everything that we can in order to avoid this from happening yet again. Again, very, very brilliantly stated. And he's going to continue talking about what the START Treaty was with the Soviet Union, of course, which he signed. And again, this is a way to prevent things from getting out of control, to prevent catastrophic events from taking place. That's what we always should be working for. Every single president should be working towards peace. Not war, but peace. And if we can't realize that's what our leaders should be working on, negotiations, treaties, the arms limitations, then what are we doing? We're setting ourselves up for future generations to have to solve them on a battlefield. I don't think anybody listening would want that. War should always be the last line of a negotiation, folks. Should not ever be something we just jump into, is what we are seeing today, unfortunately. Let's let President Reagan continue. He's got much more to say, and I'll jump in when I can. But here's going to finish talking about what the New START treaty was all about.
This is a fitting occasion to announce that START, as we call it, Strategic Arms Reductions, that the negotiations between our country and the Soviet Union will begin on the 29th of June. As for existing strategic arms agreements, we will refrain from actions which undercut them so long as the Soviet Union shows equal restraint. With goodwill and dedication on both sides, I pray that we will achieve a safer world. Our goal is peace. We can gain that peace by strengthening our alliances, by speaking candidly of the dangers before us, by assuring potential adversaries of our seriousness, by actively pursuing every chance of honest and fruitful negotiation. It is with these goals in mind that I will depart Wednesday for Europe, and it's altogether fitting that we have this moment to reflect on the price of freedom and those who have so willingly paid it. For however important the matters of state before us this next week, they must not disturb the solemnity of this occasion, nor must they dilute our sense of reverence and the silent gratitude we hold for those who are buried here. The willingness of some to give their lives so that others might live never fails to evoke in us a sense of wonder and mystery. One gets that feeling here on this hallowed ground, and I have known that same poignant feeling as I looked out across the rows of white crosses and stars of David in Europe, in the Philippines, and the military cemeteries here in our own land. Each one marks the resting place of an American hero, and in my lifetime, the heroes of World War I, the doughboys, the GIs of World War II, or Korea, or Vietnam. They span several generations of young Americans, all different and yet all alike, like the markers above their resting places, all alike in a truly meaningful way. Winston Churchill said of those he knew in World War II, they seemed to be the only young men who could laugh and fight at the same time. A great general in that war called them our secret weapon, just the best darn kids in the world. Each died for a cause he considered more important than his own life.
I want to pause at this point while we're listening to President Reagan speak. Think of the altruism and the selflessness to enlist. And by the way, there's so many stories about young men enlisting before they were eligible to even join in World War I, World War II. And you have to really sit back and think. I'm thinking right now, a 16, 17-year-old saying, I'm going to put my life on the line for freedom, for my nation, for my fellow countrymen. I can't think of a more honorable and selfless, altruistic, and brave commitment that somebody could do for somebody else. There's nothing else to it. The integrity involved in that as well is just unremarkable, unrelenting. And that's what makes today so important, ladies and gentlemen. When we think about that demeanor about these men, I don't think anything else can compare to that. I really don't. And to enlist and to serve in such a way to protect one's nation, again, is simply unmatched. Let's continue.
Well, they didn't volunteer to die. They volunteered to defend values for which men have always been willing to die if need be. The values which make up what we call civilization. And how they must have wished, in all the ugliness that war brings, that no other generation of young men to follow would have to undergo that same experience. As we honor their memory today, let us pledge that their lives, their sacrifices, Their valor shall be justified and remembered for as long as God gives life to this nation. And let us also pledge to do our utmost to carry out what must have been their wish, that no other generation of young men will ever have to share their experiences and repeat their sacrifice. Earlier today, with the music that we have heard and that of our national anthem, I can't claim to know the words of all the national anthems in the world, but I don't know of any other that ends with a question and a challenge as ours does. Does that flag still wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? That is what we must do. Thank you.
So very, very well said, very well spoken, as Reagan always was. We've got to ask ourselves the question, do we still serve that same mindset, that same value in this country today? And at a time when we have so much of a bifurcation between whether it be the founding of the nation or other issues that have taken place, and we see kind of a lack of camaraderie with, for example, the Democrats on service and what have you, patriotism becomes a little bit more difficult, don't you think? When the country is spit on, when the Constitution is spit on, when our military is spit on, and people are trained at a young age to despise the country in many ways. It's a very trying time. And again, 250 years of a nation, as we will celebrate this 4th of July, is a very long time. It's a very long time. And I think if Washington and Jefferson and James Madison could see that, their nation, that they came together and created, would last for 250 years, this country, with these brilliant ideas that they had taken from other parts of other existing governments and other times of civilization. I think they'd be very impressed, though, that it made it as far as it did. But the idea, and Reagan really highlights this in his speech, it is always something you have got to fight for. So we as the inheritance of this great nation, this great Constitution, these great values, where anybody and everybody can be free to choose their own destiny, has got to be fought for at all costs. At all costs. You can't let it go. Doesn't matter what you hear on the news media from someone pontificating, that America's this, America's racist, America's this, the Constitution's racist. All this nonsense is meant to divide people. And we have got to speak out against that. We cannot allow that to happen. And this brings me to the now, on this Memorial Day. Now, whether you're having a barbecue or you're boating or beers or watching the ball game or at the beach crashing some waves, as I used to love to do all the time. You like that alliteration I did there too, don't you, huh? Yeah, there you go. Take some time to reflect on those that have come before us. Maybe you know somebody in your own family that served, or friends of yours that has served and are no longer with us, that they have put their lives on the line in uniform for our freedom, our rights, this land that we live on, that we were so blessed to be a part of, and a constitution, and for our country. And they are now deceased. But their memory still lives on, each and every one of them. And we must always have the respect and honor for those servicemen and women, and that goes a long way. And again, especially for those that had served and gave the ultimate sacrifice with their lives during combat. These men and women need to be honored today, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, I just want to say God bless everyone from my family that has served, and of course the men and women that have served this nation that are no longer with us. Today is the day for them, and that we remember that, and we honor that, and we respect that. Because freedom is never, ever free. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to move on to some more topics today. As I know most commentators and news anchors are off today, I'm still here with you. So let's get to some other very important news today, as always. Let's jump right into what's taking place with these negotiations inside of Iran right now that we're all hearing about over this weekend. We've been hearing some positivity, of course. This is from Bloomberg. It says U.S. President Donald Trump says negotiations with Iran over the interim deal to extend their ceasefire and reopen the Strait of Hormuz was proceeding nicely. Okay. All right. Anything else? No, nothing, of course. Trump's comments made in a Truth Social post on Monday, in which has also urged the Saudi Arabians and Qataris, among other countries, to join the Abraham Accords, added to the signals that the U.S. and Iran are nearing an agreement. Let me talk about the Abraham Accords really, really quickly. First of all, not a chance that the Abraham Accords have survived this. They will not. I think the Abraham Accords are dead in the water, of course, in any meaningful sense is what I could say about this. You know, you're going to get Saudi Arabia and Qatar to join Israel in rapprochement after their actions are destroying their nations. Something tells me that's not going to be the case. Certainly nothing meaningful. I don't see that happening. Without this war, these countries wouldn't be in this mess. And they're all struggling too, by the way. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They're not happy about this war. Not in the slightest. So again, I can't see any type of communion coming together with Israel on this. Not by a long shot. And by the way, we haven't even seen the end of this war yet. Just so we're all clear on that. Now, I'm getting reports too out of the Wall Street Journal that oil prices now have dropped 5% in today's session, with Brent crude falling below $100 a barrel, while the global equity markets rose today. And I want to kind of say a couple things about this. We're looking at Brent crude right now. It's about $95 a barrel, lowest it's been since mid-April. And again, this is going to help pull the European bond yields lower as inflation worries are cooling and the dollar weaken. You're saying the United States and UK stock and bond markets are closed for the holiday stays, so we don't know the full effect of all of this. But remember, what I've always told you about this is all political rhetoric. Even if we had, for example, let's say the war ended today. We'd all love it. We'd all be very happy that President Trump and, of course, the Iranians and the Pakistanis had come together and found a way to end this war. We would love that. We don't want war. We don't want more war. We don't want this to extend any longer than it should have, which it shouldn't even started to begin with. But now we're talking supply chain issues. We're talking about bottlenecking. Sometimes it takes the oil in that region or the cargo in that region 2 months to get to their final destinations. It's not a quick fix, ladies and gentlemen. And there's no way to really fix that. So the oil that had reached California almost about 2 weeks ago now, one of the final ships that's waiting to dock at Long Beach right now, there's nothing coming behind that for at least another 2 months. So we're going to see supply chain issues. So maybe right now we have a little period where it dips down a little bit more and everyone's excited because they think everything's over with. The reality is the supply chains are going to be disrupted very, very soon. Because once that final bit of oil that has come in goes through the refining process and makes it to where it needs to go, nothing else is coming in. And that's something you cannot ignore. So I know people are happy with, oh, look, see, everything was fine, Gerace, 5D chess, 6D chess. You just didn't know what you were talking about. No, actually, I do know what I'm talking about because nothing else is coming in. Certainly in the terms of energy, which is very, very crucial for any existing first world country to exist. I mean, we can't make it without oil in this country. We certainly don't produce enough on our own. And right now we're selling oil to China and Japan, as it seems is taking place right now. But here's the thing. You're seeing it take place in parts of Asia right now. You're seeing it take places in parts of Europe right now. Everyone is paying more for gas at the pumps right now. Those numbers are only going to go up once that supply chain is completely out for as long as it is. And by the way, it's going to take a while for these oil refineries inside the Persian Gulf to get back up and running. Again, it's not a quick over-the-night fix. It's going to take a while to get this going. Some have even suggested it could take several years. I don't doubt that for a second. Especially if they've been damaged in any of these attacks from Iran. So it's not over yet by a long shot, ladies and gentlemen. Don't think that is. I know we're all excited. Oh, look, the oil's coming down. Right now, it's because of the rhetoric. Never forget the CEO of Chevron said that we're about 1 billion barrels short of where we should be right now in terms of oil production right here inside the United States. And we are we are the greatest producer of oil per day. We produce about 13.6 million barrels of oil in this country every single day. We outshadow everybody else. Despite all that, the price of oil on the global market, of which all oil is, that's where they get those futures from. That's where we get our pricing from. Brent crude, West Texas Intermediate, Murbain, Dubai, wherever it is. Urals in Russia. All that is on a global scale. So when you see 25 to 31% is what I've been told, of the oil supply in the world is no longer there, ladies and gentlemen, what's going to have to happen? Basic Economics 101. When supply goes away and that demand stays as is, you're going to see higher prices. We haven't seen the likes of it. The increase in prices right now were a result of the war beginning because people didn't know what was going on. So the oil refineries in this country, the producers, they rose their prices. Again, logistics has to rise as well. But we haven't seen that supply cut out yet. So be very, very aware that what we are seeing right now is not because we have a shortage of supply, it's because of the worry about it. That fear is not set in yet. Just keep that in mind right now. When everyone's cheering that, hey, look, the price of oil is going down. Is the price of your pump going down yet? Of course it isn't. Of course it's not. And let's move on to the rest of this article. And it is being confirmed that the Iranians are accepting the fact that there are talks going on right now. And an Iranian delegation headed by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf traveled to Doha for consultations with senior Qatari officials on the negotiations. The Iranian central bank governor, Abdel Nasser Hamateh, was part of the group and was set to discuss the release of the frozen Iranian funds, is what's being reported right now. So let me make this statement to you. First things first, nothing goes forth, nothing's going to move forward, nothing will proceed with any negotiation unless the United States agrees to the unfreezing of their assets. This is money that they gave to the United States during the Shah's reign of terror. And one other point that they will not budge on will be the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon. And of course, their occupation of the land there. Without any of this stopping, without the Israelis stopping the siege on Lebanon and the unfreezing of the assets, I would say, too, the lifting of the sanctions, too, would be probably one of the other top pieces of this. You're not going to see any negotiations come forth. I'm not saying this is dead on arrival, but what I am saying is the Iranians are going to say, hey, we're not moving forward unless X, Y, and Z are met right now. Now, we know Netanyahu's not happy about this. You're seeing Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham's of the world, the Tom Cottons, all up in arms about what's going on right now. They don't like it. Why? Because their donors, the AIPAC donors, don't want this either. They don't want the negotiations. They want the war to go on. They want regime change. They want that enriched uranium, which they're not going to get, by the way, just again, so we're all clear on this. We've already heard Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei now saying that they will not hand over the highly enriched uranium. They will not go down to 0% enrichment. So what are we going to get from this? Trump has already said, hey, don't listen to anybody saying it's going to be like a JCPOA. Well, what are we going to get from this? We were listening to President Reagan talk about arms control just a little while ago. We had President Trump in 2018 rip up the JCPOA, which he called a bad deal, then decided to replace it with nothing, which gave the Iranians carte blanche to do whatever the hell they really felt like. Now, I will tell you, they're not building a nuclear bomb. They never were. But they were enriching uranium to a high degree, 60%. We talk about what took place with the Russians. The New START Treaty, for example, we decided not to renew it. Does that make the world a better or safer place if the Russians now can do whatever they want with their technology, limit their capacity of what they can build? Of course it doesn't. So when we look in the context of where we are today, especially on a foreign stage, President Trump is not making a more stable world. You cannot bully people into just doing whatever the hell you want them to do. It's never going to work out. So that's why when I'm listening to President Reagan talk about negotiations and peace and being candid about your expectations, we're not doing that. Because during negotiations, we're bombing these countries. We're not bombing Russia, of course. Although I will say the assassination attempt on his life had something to do with the United States. I'll just put it to you like that. But we've got to come to terms with where we are with this. This idea that the Iranians are building a nuclear bomb is ridiculous because, again, they came to the table in 2015 and they agreed to it. They have signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, saying they're not going to build a nuclear bomb. Every step of the way, they're agreeing to not build a nuclear bomb. Now, you could hear Marco Rubio all day like, well, they're never honest. Really? Then show me any bit of evidence, Mr. Rubio, since you're the National Security Advisor, where this information is that they're building a nuclear bomb. Now, you could point to the highly enriched uranium. Fine, we know it's only 60% highly enriched. Can't build a bomb with that. And while that was probably used as a negotiating piece to get the United States to come to the table, didn't work out that way. That was them letting us know that, look, we can do this if we want to. Make another deal with us. But we replaced it with nothing in 2018. Why did they build a bomb then? Doesn't make any sense if that's their intention with all this. And by the way, Joe Biden, no better, didn't do anything about that as well. And now during negotiations, though, we decided to bomb them. When we had a very good deal last time, the enrichment of uranium would have been 3.76% tops, allowing them to enrich to medical and civilian purposes, which would have been fine. They would have agreed not to build a nuclear bomb. They would have allowed United States weapons inspectors to go to their facilities to make sure that they're not building a bomb as well, which they've already done too, by the way, with the IAEA, which Rafael Grossi has already told us. There's no evidence they're building a nuclear bomb. Tulsi Gabbard has told us the same thing. Joe Kent has told us the same thing, both of whom are no longer going to be working for the United States government. So we'll be interested to see now what takes place and whoever's in charge of those departments now. But this is the truth of the matter. You have your intelligence and your counterterrorism group coming up and saying, they're not building a bomb, folks. And everyone's pointing the finger at them, calling them disloyal. Well, again, folks, facts are facts. Are they building a bomb or not? And if they were building a bomb, why would they be negotiating about nuclear technology with us right now? If they were. Let's be clear on this. If they really wanted that, they would not negotiate with us. So I'm interested to see exactly what's being discussed right now. We're not told any specifics about what's going on. We're told the talks are proceeding well, fine, whatever. How many times have we heard this so far? At least 5,000 or 6,000 times since this war has begun. If the Iranians really, really want to make a deal, okay, fine. They'll make a deal, but it's going to be on their terms. And at best, Trump may get a JCPOA-like agreement with them, likely by them to have the U.S. Senate come in and say, listen, we'll do this as long as it becomes in treaty form, that we are in this negotiation with you, and it's backed by the Senate, which, again, would ultimately be law with the Iranians. That way, there's no further attacks, because, again, if the Iranians say, okay, we'll stop our ballistic missile program, now they're not going to do this. Okay, we'll enrich to zero so long as you give us the enriched uranium, which we can use. How do we know that Trump can't just say, oh, well, we don't have to do that? I mean, he hasn't been exactly honest with them, ladies and gentlemen, if we're being honest about this. And as a result, this has the Iranians saying, well, look, we cannot trust the United States. Certainly they can't trust President Trump. And that's a very awful thing, if you ask me, right now. We also know, for example, they've set up the PGSA, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority right now. That's been created by them. And they will begin to hold on to this position right now. That is the way in which you can cross the strait. So don't listen to this idea that the Iranians are going to just open up the strait right now. Right? This is out of CNBC. Trump says on Saturday that the peace deal with Iran will reopen the Strait of Hormuz is largely negotiated and will be announced shortly. A development that could end a conflict that has choked global energy markets and pushed inflation inside the United States to its highest level in years. Well, again, that's because of President Trump. There's no doubt about that. And what's even more is that the strait is not closed. The strait is open to anyone that will pay the fee, which the United States doesn't want them to have. But anyone that's willing to pay the $2 million that will coordinate with the Iranian government can pass through. That's been the case this entire time. And those Gulf Arab states that helped aid and abet the United States during this war, lent their airspace, lent their bases, allowed them to be in a position to strike Iran, they have to pay even more now, these governments that want to get their cargo out. So when they say the Abraham Accords are on the table again, I think they're dead in the water, to be honest with you. So now the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, and the Bahrainis are going to pay even more money now just to get their same goods out? And they're going to come to the table with Israel right now. Again, I think it's, I think it's a far wish for the Israelis. They're going to be isolated completely in this region right now. I'll be very clear with you about they're going to be very, very isolated as time goes on, especially if there's another attack going on. And by the way, since we're talking about attacks, especially after this explosion in Pakistan over the weekend that killed over 100 people, by the way, in a train bombing by the Baluchis, who have very strong ties to the Israelis. The Israelis have armed them in the past with weapons and what have you, intelligence. They were a part of the so-called protest, which, again, were violent riots in Iran in January of this year. We know that Mossad, CIA, MI6 were involved in this. The Pakistanis are not dumb. They understand what's going on. They understand who these groups are. The Iranians understand this too. The Iranians figured out exactly that Mossad was directly coordinating with these groups, the Baluchis, the Mujahideens, the Kurds, giving them weapons. Trump talked about it openly. It's very well known now because they've let it out. Oh, we did this before. We gave them weapons. Okay, what did they do with those weapons? They attacked the police in the streets. They attacked military bases. They set fires to buildings. They know exactly that it was a female Mossad agent giving the direction on what exactly to do. This wasn't an organic movement inside the country, as what you've been led to believe. And no, 45,000 people were not just simply killed for peacefully protesting by the Iranian government. That's a bunch of nonsense, so let's stop about that. That's just to get you on board with what's going on with this war, which again is completely unprovoked. So, ladies and gentlemen, where we sit right now with this war, again, I don't know where we go from this. I really don't know. We'll have to see what is actually negotiated upon, if even anything is going to stick with this. Something tells me it's going to fall right apart again, and I think Trump will want to continue with the fight. That's been my position now for quite some time. When either the right amount of arms come in to our battleships that are still in the region right now, by the way, they will continue on with this fighting as they see fit, because, again, Netanyahu does not want this to end. He doesn't want it to end. And you're seeing all the damage control. Netanyahu says he never tells Trump to do anything. Trump just coming out and saying, oh, no, I tell him what to do. Really? When the hell have you ever told him what to do? What have you told him to do, by the way? Give us a prime example of what that is. Did you tell him to go into Lebanon? Did you tell him to go back into Gaza right now, where they're shelling people every single day? You're a part of the board of peace in the region, then how come there's no peace in the region? How come the Gazans are not getting humanitarian aid that they're supposed to be getting right now? Again, it seems like ever since the so-called ceasefire, which is not a ceasefire, because Israel's never held to a ceasefire, so what's taking place in Gaza has been completely ignored. Now we're getting reports now that at least 100,000 people, and I'm sure that number is much, much higher because we don't know who's under this rubble, but 100,000 people have died, mostly women and children. People are living in makeshift tents. They have no electricity in many cases. They have no access to food or water or medical supplies. It's a disaster. And you're telling us that you tell Netanyahu what to do? Well, then, can you tell him to stop this, please? Can you tell him to get out of southern Lebanon? Tell him to stop bombing the suburbs of Beirut, which are killing Muslim Lebanese and Christian Lebanese alike, which is causing both of them to come together right now. I mean, we've got to be honest about what's going on, folks. And again, you're hearing the war cries from, again, the Lindsey Grahams, the Ted Cruzes, the political pundits on Fox News, all about, we got to go in again. We got to finish the job. We got to go in again. We got to arm the Kurds again. We got to stop. It's over. Accept it for what it is. It's over. You're not going to defeat the Iranians. You may go and bomb them again. I don't deny that. But you're simply not going to militarily defeat them. It's not going to work. You're not going to end a 5,000-year civilization. It's just not going to happen. So I hope President Trump will understand this and reflect this, and especially on a day like today, understand we don't want more war at all, and that we've got to come to terms with this and end this right away. Okay. Now, that being said, we've got to look at another very strong headline making the news today. It's on NBC. It says, China controls a metal that's key for the Iran war, setting the United States on a global hunt for more of it. Now, would we be on a hunt for more if we were thinking about ending this conflict right now? Probably not. I just tell you, probably not. By the way, we need to also re-up our weapon capacity now that we've devastated a lot of our supply, and it takes a long time to build. But it says, as the United States wages war on Iran, it is burning through stockpiles of advanced weaponry, munitions, including Tomahawk, Patriot, precision strike missiles. Replacing them will require a powerful metal. And it's tungsten. I think it's tungsten. I can't say it. Tungsten. There you go. Whose production and refining is dominated by, you name it, China. Now, this is leading the U.S. to desperately search for it elsewhere now because they need this. It's used in fighter jets, bunker buster bombs, armor-piercing rounds, and missile systems alike, making it this indispensable element for our national security, folks. We need it. So when I talked to you on the program last week, I said very clearly to you, I said, we've got to get in the enrichment of refining the the rare earth minerals. We've got to do this ourselves. We cannot rely on China to do it for us. China, who is a foe geopolitically, understands this. And if they want to shut this down, in the case of what we're seeing right now, they're controlling us. So they could really shut this down completely. They could shut down our entire military. Do we want this? Absolutely not. That's no good for us. Certainly on a military level. Now, if we can't do this, what do we do then? Do we have our hands tied behind our back? Do we beg China for more? On day one of President Trump's second year in office, second term, I should say, he should have said right away, we've got to become independent with mining the rare earths and refining the rare earths. That is the future right now. And we cannot let China control over 90% of the market, because then they determine everybody else's fate. They are in the driver's seat. We are not. And we don't want to be in the back seat for this one, folks. Let me just be very clear with you about that. The United States has had no active commercial, what is it, tungsten? I don't know. This word's bothering me right now. Can't they pick a word that everybody could say? My God. Anyways, we haven't had any mining of this since 2015. And of course, the Trump administration now has made it a mission now to curb their dependence on the Chinese supply. Very good. Very good. But we shouldn't have been in this point at all. It's a war metal. That's what it comes down to. And the one place where it can be found is in the mountains of eastern South Korea, our ally, at a mine owned by a U.S. company that holds millions of tons of this. Well, let's understand something. Very, very crucial that we get our hands on this, first of all. Very crucial that we ourselves refine it here in the United States, not someplace else, not letting someone else hold the access to it. Because this is as stupid as the Iranians believing that we'll refine and enrich their own uranium for them. It's stupid. No country wants to be that dependent on somebody else. Now, this metal, again, it's big in the tech sector. It's used in semiconductors. It's used in batteries, smartphones, you name it. We should be doing this ourselves. So when I said to you last week there were talks about refining rare earths here in the United States, I said, good. This is what Trump should be focusing on. He should have been focusing on this from day one. And he has not been, because he's been worried about this ridiculous conflict with Iran and foreign policy issues that are completely asinine in and of themselves. We should have already had a treaty with the Iranians on nuclear technology. Could have been fine last June, except Israel, who apparently listens to Trump, went right in and did what they wanted to do, destroying everything, killing the negotiator, Ali Shamkhani. Now we expect the Iranians to come and beg on their knees? Not going to happen. And now China, who again is a member of BRICS, along with Iran, who are working closely with Iran, get their oil from Iran, they can pull the plug on this, folks. They can shut us down. So we've got to be very clear about this. We've got to stop this. And we've got to stop this dependency on China for not just rare earths, but for many other things too. That's why I said the manufacturing has got to come back to the United States, and so does the refining of rare earths, of course, which we led in the 1970s, and now, of course, we gave it to China to do. My God, how ridiculous. And I didn't want to be upset today, but again, this is so ridiculous. It doesn't need to be happening at all. We can do things ourselves. We don't need to rely on other countries. I guess that's my biggest takeaway of today. Oh, by the way, since we're closing up today's broadcast very, very soon, let me go over this other very important piece right now. This comes out of from the Statesman. And over the weekend, we had a shooting at the White House. Again, that's unbelievable to see these things, but a 21-year-old man named Nasire Best opened fire at a security booth just outside of the White House complex before being fatally shot by Secret Service. The shooting occurred outside of the White House at the 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest entrance near the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. And according to Secret Service, a spokesman said that the suspect approached the choke point, took out a weapon from a bag, and began firing at the officers stationed there. Again, it looks like this was unprovoked. Somewhere between 15 and 30 gunshots were then fired, according to law enforcement sources. Secret Service agents then returned fire and wounded Best, later dying on the way to George Washington Medical Center. Now, who is this guy? Apparently, this guy was arrested last year. He was previously detained by the White House on June 26, 2025, after he approached officers and made threats to them directly, and then again on July 10th, 2025, for entering a restricted area at the complex. So this guy's all over the White House last year. How does somebody allowed to do this and get out and do this again? This guy's not unknown to these people. Says here Best was placed under arrest on a charge of unlawful entry after the July 10th incident after he walked into a restricted area near the White House, according to a court document filed in the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. Court records cited by the New York Post stated that during the July encounter, Best claimed that he was Jesus Christ. Okay. He also said that he wanted to get arrested. Following that incident, he was sent to a psychiatric ward for mental health treatments. Now, as a result of what took place Saturday, the White House went into lockdown. Nobody inside the White House, including President Trump, was hurt or even threatened with this violence that took place. But let me ask you this. If Best was psychotic, right, with homicidal tendencies, clearly, why was he released back into society? Shouldn't this be somebody that people are looking into very, very closely if he's sent to a psych ward? That you would not release somebody like this who's walking up to the White House many, many times, claiming to be Jesus Christ? How did he get a weapon, too, by the way? You know, right after even before he was released to his identity, they were already saying he had mental illness. How do you know that if you don't even know this guy? Was he that known that this guy was a psychotic walking around the streets of D.C.? And if so, how did that even come to place? This totally reeks of what takes place time and time again. A lot of time with these activist judges. They give these career criminals, that's what they are, probation, then they go on the streets and do it again. And then not until they seriously hurt somebody, think of Irina Zarutka, who was stabbed on the train coming home from work by somebody talking to themselves. Someone that had been arrested 15 times prior, but was released. We see this now time and time again. Is this the same exact damn thing as with this case right now, that we're letting somebody on the street that can do harm to not only himself, but other people? It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable that this takes place. We've got to hold people more accountable, folks. Because, what is this? The third time now we've had an attack on President Trump's life? Now, I'm not saying it was a direct attack in this case, but now we have somebody walking up to the White House and shooting at people. This has got to stop. This has got to stop. We cannot accept this. We cannot live this way. Let's open the state hospitals yet again. This is what we need to do again. People that are insane. We see this with the homeless population in our cities, on our streets. Reopen the state hospitals. We can't have people out there committing violent acts against our citizens. It just doesn't work that way. You don't release them back into civil society. This is becoming a less and less civil society. And I don't want to withhold this information from you. Of course, this gets, always better. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says that the shooting near the White House over the weekend reiterates the need for President Trump's ballroom. Why is it always about the ballroom? Why is it not about the safety of others? By the way, an innocent bystander was struck as well. I believe they're in critical condition right now. No update on who the person was. But here we go. Blanche said in a federal court filing on Sunday, he's arguing that the incident underscores the critical need for top-level, state-of-the-art security at the White House, including the ballroom. They love this ballroom, don't they, folks? That's all we hear about. Some lunatic runs into the Washington Hilton. Oh, we need a ballroom. No, what you need to do is secure the perimeter. That's what you need to do, like was what we saw on Saturday evening. And when you secure the perimeter, you reduce the risk of a serious threat. That's how you do things. What does having a ballroom do if you don't secure the perimeter? Any part of the White House, I guess, what are we going to just keep building out of the White House now? Why is this the biggest takeaway with all this all the time? Unbelievable. By the way, I have one more article I want to go over as well with you. This comes out of California. This from Reuters. Says firefighters were contending with an overheating tank of hazardous chemicals in Southern California on Monday. And apparently there was a crack in a tank of this highly flammable methacrylate being overheated on Thursday. at the GKN Aerospace Facility in Garden Grove. And Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency, and evacuation orders had been issued for an area home of tens of thousands of people, as fears that this could rupture and, of course, spill 7,000 gallons of this toxic material or explode and endanger nearby tanks, causing a devastation of the area. Thank God the firefighters located the appearance of a crack in the tank over the weekend, which helped relieve the pressure, and the tank has now cooled slightly. So it seems like we're obviously mitigating the emergency, and of course, this is extremely positive news. So I was very, very happy to hear that. I know people who live in Garden Grove, so I'm very happy that everything is on the up and ups, and it seems like they're going to be stopping this looming threat that is at this factory. So I'm very happy to see that people are not harmed by this. Very, very happy about this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That'll do it for today's broadcast. Thank you, as always, for being here and sharing the show with others, which I always appreciate on this Memorial Day, of course. Be sure to share the show with others. Make sure you're staying prepped with food, water, medicine, fuel, money, tools, anything to be self-sufficient in these times of uncertainty. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a blessed Memorial Day, as always. And I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and as always, God bless.